I'm on the line right now with former TNA Knockouts champion, TNA Knockouts Tag Team champion, Taylor Wilde. How are you today?
I'm wonderful. How are you?
Good. And happy Canada Day to you as well.
Oh, why, thank you.
So I'll jump right into it. We haven't heard from you for a little while, and now you're back with a new podcast. It's called Wilde On, and it airs Wednesdays, and you're in your second week now. So tell me a little bit about the show, why you finally decided this, this format to come back, and what you have planned.
Yeah. So I've been retired for almost 10 years now, and I'd say like every few years I've had an opportunity kind of thrown my way by various companies. And I just really didn't have the interest at that point for one reason or another. And then I guess early March, I was propositioned by Impact to come back. It would have been March 28th for their Windsor show. And then COVID happened. What kind of changed my mind this time is I don't know. I'm just in such a different place in my life. I have another dream career. I'm a full-time firefighter. I had a beautiful baby boy who's now 2 and healthy and quite independent. I've got a wonderful husband who I can depend on, who's extremely supportive. And it seemed like all the stars had aligned, and I'm in a good place, and I'm mentally and physically stronger than I've ever been. And it seemed like the right fit. So I was really excited, and I was like mentally and physically building towards this comeback, and then COVID. So I didn't want to stop the forward momentum. And I'd kind of been tinkering away at a bunch of side projects, and I just had this idea of a podcast that focuses primarily on the women of wrestling, but about their intimate side, about the side that unless you're on the road with us or you're good friends with us, you simply wouldn't know about. And what better person to tell that story than a woman who's lived it, and highlight all the real life part of us aside from wrestling that we have to go through with a career in wrestling, if that makes sense.
Sure. And I want to get into the show a little bit, but first I'm glad you clarified, what your role was going to be in coming back, because I don't think I heard too many people, or I maybe didn't even hear anybody talking about the Windsor show, because that was supposed to be the lockdown event, and your name was mentioned a lot with the TNA There's No Place Like Home show in it was a reunion type show. So
yeah.
Was there any talk about doing that either, or was it just for the one show at that point?
Well, I think it was like, truth be told, because I have quite a history with, the people who work at Impact, formerly TNA. It was like a tryout kind of situation for the both of us. Like, I know I love wrestling. I'm excited to get back in the ring, but it's been a long time. So, to make sure that it's something I really wanted. So I think if I was into it, then it would have gone from there, kind of thing. And then there's the simple fact that I'm Canadian and these are American dates. So, there's a lot of paperwork that goes into that. So Windsor it all seemed like a good fit.
It's really an odd time with COVID, quarantine, and speaking more to your point about being Canadian citizen and coming down here. Is that like really the major thing that affected your comeback plans, was like issues with traveling over the border, or was it just all kind of like a bunch of stuff that snowballed?
Truly, from a few different angles, it was the immigration issue, because when COVID, essentially right around March 28th, we had gone, the country was under, U.S. borders were locked, essentially. And then when they opened, although technically I could travel as an essential worker, the problem being is I would still need like an American work visa, and I don't think wrestlers are priority right now in terms of who needs visas. Compounded with that, as a frontline worker, as a firefighter dealing with the vulnerable community, if I were to travel, I would have to then be quarantined for 2 weeks and then miss 2 weeks of work. So just it was something that on all angles didn't make sense.
Mhm. And then besides your job, you have a young son that you mentioned, and I can
Exactly.
understand why it wasn't an option, or why
Yeah.
it wasn't a
Like when I
decision
go to
lightly.
Exactly. Like when I go to work on our medical calls, even though I'm dressed in full PPE and I sanitize and I do everything I can, there's still a small risk. You never know. And then compounded with travel, it just, for my family, it was a great decision.
I listened to the show earlier this week, and not only are you a full-time firefighter, but you went back and got your BA in psychology, which I thought was pretty cool. I think,
Oh, thank you.
and congratulations on that.
Oh, thanks.
I think one of the things that people from that era of TNA was, people want to catch up with you guys, like you and Monty Brown and Roxy and certain people that you don't hear from. So it's kind of nice, now that we're in the social media age, that really wasn't started when you guys were wrestling. Like now you get a chance, and now with the podcast, you get a chance to see what you guys are doing and whatever you choose to put out there. So
Yeah.
do you have anything else that's going on right now that you really are proud of and want to get out there?
Oh gosh. I guess I'm spinning a few plates at the moment. Just work. I'm happy that my education's done for the moment. I don't think I can put up with any more schooling because after I finished my BA, I then got a diploma in firefighting, which doesn't sound that exciting, but it is like an 8-month intensive program, 16 weeks additional physical training, and then you have to get all these additional certificates on the side. I started up a little mom and baby Instagram when Taylor was first born. It's at the Mom Bod Workout, and I was keeping up with that pretty avidly. And then when COVID hit and I was working out at home a lot, I started reposting those videos. So that was just like a little fun project. But no, this podcast is kind of turning into something like it's been this really rejuvenating, invigorating, like creative outlet I didn't even know I needed. And I'm really enjoying reliving some of these stories that I'd forgotten about and connecting with so many of my girlfriends who have become so wildly successful. Um, so yeah, that's and then I'm a mom and a wife, and yeah, I got my hands full.
Episode 1, you go over why you left wrestling. You said, you were burnout from just the business itself. You saw the direction of TNA changing, where there was less focus on the knockouts division. Have you kept up with it regularly since then? Impact itself, or just the wrestling business in general?
Full disclosure, when I retired, I was like, done, 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 done. Besides the fact that when SmackDown and Raw and ROH and TNA or Impact or whatever it was at the time, when they would come through Toronto, I would catch up with my friends and I would go to the odd show and then more do it for the hangout than anything for the catch up. But I didn't watch wrestling for years, and I'm a pretty all or nothing type person. But about 6 months ago, maybe a year ago, I really started to catch up on everything. And working at a fire hall, there's always some sort of fight neck work thing going on the TV. So even though I wasn't avidly watching it, I caught things here and there and watched the odd Total Divas show here and there too.
I know people say it a lot, but wrestling it works in cycles, and you were leaving as there was less focus on the women, and now you're coming back into a time where there's never been more focus on them. And looking at the Impact Knockouts division, like you have Taya Valkyrie, who's an established name, one of the biggest women's wrestlers in the past few years, and then you have Jordan Grace, Deonna Purrazzo, Rosemary. So I definitely think you're getting back into it at the right time because they're super talented and they're so diverse in their styles, in their ring gear, all of that. So I know you said that you really only were testing the waters with that show, but if you start working again, are there any names out there that you really want to work with? Maybe for the
Oh
first
God.
time or again?
Well, truth be told, like you said, I think it's a really, really exciting time again for women's wrestling. Like when I was getting into TNA, I think the most exciting thing about women's wrestling is when there is diversity. And TNA was one of the first companies that actually had characters, like real women wrestler characters versus, the model era where everyone was quite same. I feel like that's what's happening again, just to reinforce your point now, is you've got characters, like, you've got relatable people, you've got larger than life people, and it's making me fall in love with wrestling again. Especially, from the women's perspective. It's hard for me to not be biased. I've been out of it for so long that these are women I have never wrestled. So, there's so much talent out there that I'd be happy to go toe to toe with any of them. But it's very different now because I'm, older, I'm wiser, I'm more mentally strong, and yeah, I think I could be quite the force to be reckoned with now.
More to your point about that era really introducing characters and stories, like not only were you a first time ever champion with the knockouts tag team championships, but you were in a Monsters Ball match teaming with Abyss against Daphne and Raven. Like if that's not if that's not giving you like the thumbs up sign, seal of approval, like that not only they trust you, but you know Monsters Ball at that time in TNA, that was like a hallmark match. That and King of the Mountain.
I was there at like, as far as like wrestling goes, period. It was a great time. And I'm so proud of everything I did with Impact and excuse me, with TNA at the time. It's just, besides the fact that I was burnt out, like I said, and times were changing, it's just, what was once great was changing, and it wasn't just for us, it was for the X division. There was a big shift there too, and who was getting, camera time was changing, so it was the right call. But yeah, Impact has their homegrown talent, and they're really pushing all those names, and that's what TNA did in the beginning, and that's what made them great. So like you said, it's oh, okay. Taylor's very excited about the new era of wrestling as well.
That's good. Always got to start them young. Get them
Yeah.
in the ground floor. Kira Hogan is another name that's new to Impact. She did an interview not too long ago. They were talking about reintroducing the Knockouts tag team titles and brought up you about hinting at returning. And she said, it's a great time for the Knockouts division, and it's a great time for you and potentially bringing those titles back because you're an icon in that company. You're a pillar of the Knockouts division. And Kira Hogan did an interview a couple weeks ago and was talking about, you hinting at a return and the Knockouts tag team titles hypothetically coming back. And I just thought that was cool to see, her paying attention to not only TNA history, but, she has a personal connection with you. So like, on TV, you're going to feud with these people, and that's always entertaining, but, it's kind of touching to see, these people have a connection behind the scenes with you or just, a fan perspective.
100%. Well, that's truthfully, I hadn't heard that, and that makes me feel pretty amazing. I'm very humbled. I've been out of the game for a very long time, and you never really know how far your reach is when your career is over. So that makes me feel, it makes me feel pretty good. And, you know, also coming back, I've always been very much for girl power, like women building up other women. And although technically in wrestling, everyone is in direct competition with each other, you're still a family and you're a sisterhood. And, I don't know Kira, but she sounds like she's a good human, and I look forward to working with her in the future.
Are there any matches that you would recommend from your career that maybe people going back and catching up with you, or maybe seeing you for the first time, that you'd recommend that, really stand out in your career?
Oh gosh. Well, I guess my debut match in TNA against Awesome Kong, when I was a fan in the audience. That was a massive moment. The Monster Balls match, another huge moment. I had one or two televised matches with Hamada, and she's an incredibly, I think, underrated female wrestler. And I feel like we had some pretty epic barn burners that didn't get a lot of attention for one reason or another. And the Beautiful People pageant show, that was epic.
That was still when the governor was around, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I remember that. Like, it was entertaining because it was one of those things where you're like, kind of like screaming at your TV like you would for a movie, like the killer's behind you, but this is like she's not really the governor, and it was like it was just so it was like towing the line of like being cheesy but funny, and it just for some reason it worked.
Totally. And did she not look identical to Sarah Palin?
Absolutely. And then when I found out who it really was, I was like, wait, what? Because
I know. What a trip.
it was great. And the reason I ask is when everybody went in quarantine, everybody, most people were worried, like, where are we going to get our wrestling from? What are we going to watch? And, all these companies are finding ways. But one of the things I found most interesting was, there's a whole library of stuff now. There's WWE Network, Impact Plus
Impact.
app, and getting new fans, like not just you, but, anybody that isn't, maybe not on their radar. Like you can just go on, log in spite of everything that's going on, I think at least that's a positive. Like maybe somebody finds a new passion.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. COVID's been such a, like you said, the weird time that I think it's really an interesting time for wrestling, because one, you have the live shows that are happening within the audience, and yeah, everyone's going back in history and watching the catalog. So what's old is almost new again.
Mm-hmm. You dropped episode 2 of the podcast today. Natalia was your first guest. Can you talk about maybe some other plans you have for down the line for Wilde On?
Oh gosh, yeah. I don't want to give it away because I want to kind of keep every week exciting and like a little bit of a surprise. But my next guest is also Canadian, also WWE related. What I will say is, at least for the like near future, every guest I have will have some correlation with my career. They at some point, like my next guest, without blowing it, had a big influence on me wrestling internationally. With Natty, we were in developmental together. So I'll be having my TNA girlfriends for sure, and other girls I trained with in Toronto, or I've got some girls that I actually trained post retiring. So it's not only am I telling the story of female wrestlers, I'm also actually kind of telling my history through these girls, because our lives have meshed in some sort of way, and that's why we're friends.
Wilde On airs Wednesdays on Anchor, Player FM, Google Podcasts, Apple Music, all kinds of stuff, all kinds of apps. So Wilde on Wednesdays, you can look for it each week. Natalia episode is out now, and then episode 3 will have another guest that will be announced later.
Yes.
So where can people follow you and catch up with you? If they're not...
You can follow me on Instagram and on Twitter with the same handle at Real Taylor Wilde. Wilde spelled with an E. And the link to the podcast, you just get it off my Instagram or my Twitter.
Taylor Wilde, Wilde on Wednesdays, coming back to the wrestling business. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me.